Good evening. I'm Lori Rose, President of the League of Women Voters of the Lake Forest, Lake Bluff area. The League is a nonpartisan political organization. We seek to educate and empower voters on matters of public policy. The League studies issues and creates consensus positions which become the focus of action and advocacy. We've been doing this for nearly 100 years. Tonight, as we welcome a panel that includes a distinguished speaker from the City of Lake Forest, I'm pleased to announce that our League will be featured on the City of Lake Forest parking decal in 2020 as part of our centennial celebration. The League welcomes new members throughout the year, and we encourage you to follow our activities on Facebook, Instagram, and on our webpage. Thank you for joining us for this evening's program, Welcome Affordable Home, a discussion of affordable housing in our community. The City of Lake Forest and the Village of Lake Bluff have changed considerably since their founding, but they have maintained their unique identities and housing stock through a concept known as home rule. Home rule is the power of a local city or county to set up its own system of self-government. Home rule shifts much of the responsibility for local government from the state legislature to the local community. The League believes that educational programming is a critical part of the dialogue about affordable housing. We advocated for affordable senior housing in both Lake Forest and Lake Bluff during the past year. But we also believe that such housing should not be restricted to senior housing. As Lake Forest and Lake Bluff continue to evolve through the refinement of their comprehensive and sustainability plans, their governing bodies and boards will have the opportunity to reimagine affordable housing in a more inclusionary and comprehensive manner. We hope to explore some of these possibilities in our program this evening. And now I'm pleased to introduce Nikki Snoblin, our Vice President of Program, Advocacy, and Action, who will provide you with some background on our speakers. Thank you, Nikki.
Okay, you go that way, I'll go this way. Hi, thank you for coming. Recently somebody asked me, why in the world is the League of Women Voters doing something having to do with affordable housing? Why would the League have a position on affordable housing? The League of Women Voters at both the national level and the state level do have positions on housing that range from providing decent housing as a basic human need through encouraging affordable housing opportunities in conjunction with job opportunities. So in other words, enabling people to live where they work. So for our own league, that translates to promoting affordable housing in our community so that people who work here can afford to live in the community. People who've raised their families here and now need to downsize are able to stay in the community that they've lived in through their adult life. And also as a way of encouraging diversity and inclusion in our community. So our panelists tonight are going to give their perspectives on what constitutes affordable here in Lake Forest. It's different in every community. What kinds of affordable housing are currently available, what the future prospects are for affordable housing, and what criteria applicants have to meet for the affordable housing that is available. And we hope also to get into a little bit about the effects of offering more diverse housing on the overall community diversity, economic diversity, racial diversity, whatever else might be affected by affordable housing. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on our speakers. Rob Anthony is the president of Community Partners for Affordable Housing. Before managing affordable housing nonprofits, he was senior planner with the Lake County Planning, Building, and Development Department and the chair of the Lake County Continuum of Care for the Homeless. He also spent 2 years working with homeless children in Mwanza, Tanzania. Rob has a bachelor's degree in business and sociology and a master's degree in social work with a focus on community organizing and nonprofit management. Kathy Cerniak, who is in fact our hostess here tonight, thank you very much, is the Director of Community Development with the City of Lake Forest. She's been with the city for 22 years. Prior to that, she worked for the City of Eugene, Oregon. And Kathy has an interdisciplinary degree that covers architecture, political science, environmental studies, and urban and regional planning, which sounds actually really fascinating. So now we'll let them speak. Rob is going to come up first and show us his presentation, and then Kathy will follow. Oh, I'm sorry, I did forget one thing. You can stay here.
Okay.
We will have questions and answers at the end. If you have a question to ask, please raise your hand, and one of our card sorters will give you a card, write down your question, and then raise your hand again, and they'll pick it up from you. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Let me make sure I know how to drive here. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about the need for affordable housing and why it's important, why we're facing this problem, and then also go through some of the programs and activities that we administer to help try to address the lack of affordable housing in the area. So Community Partners for Affordable Housing, we're a nonprofit organization. Our mission is to develop affordable housing and provide services that empower individuals and families to secure and retain quality housing. Our vision is thriving communities, diverse housing, and successful residents. And when we say diverse housing, we really believe that all communities should have a range of housing options to accommodate people in different circumstances. So we don't advocate, we don't try to create all housing in a community to be affordable necessarily, but what we advocate is that there should be that range of housing options for people in different life situations and circumstances. In terms of why we have this problem, so the fair market rent in Illinois is $1,084 a month. That's what the average fair market rent is considered. In Lake County, it's a little bit higher. It's $1,212 per month is the average rent for a two-bedroom apartment. And as a lot of you probably have heard, housing is considered affordable if you're spending no more than 30% of your income on housing. If you spend more than 30% of your income on housing, HUD considers you to be housing cost burdened. And basically what that means is you're spending too much on your housing, so you can't afford to address other needs like medication and food, and you're making decisions between paying your rent or buying medication, or you're making a decision between making your mortgage payment on time or paying your utilities, or buying your food, or enrolling your kids in programs that they need to be enrolled in. There's just not enough of the pie left over to meet other life needs if you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing. And so what that means, if you're not supposed to be spending more than 30% of your income on housing, and the average monthly rent in Illinois is $1,084 per month. That means you have to be earning at least $3,614 per month in order to afford a two-bedroom apartment in Illinois. So that's about $43,000 a year, which equals about $20.85 per hour that you need to be earning to afford a two-bedroom apartment. In Lake County, because the rents are higher, that's a little bit higher. It's $23.31 per hour that you need to be able to bring in to afford a two-bedroom unit. As you know, the minimum wage is $8.25, and so you need $23.31 an hour. People at minimum wage are making $8.25 an hour. That gap is huge. And what that means is that someone who's working a minimum wage job would have to work 113 hours per week, or almost 2.9 full-time jobs in order to afford a two-bedroom apartment. So that's just on the rental side. On the ownership side, that challenge is even greater. Both rent prices and home prices have gone up like this, whereas incomes have gone up like this, and so that gap has widened over the past 30 or 40 years, which is why there's such a need for affordable housing. This slide sort of shows, this is on a national level, sort of where people fall in this housing wage. So you see that nationally, what you need for a two-bedroom apartment is $22.96 per hour. That's what you need to earn. So if you are a software developer, general and operations manager, or a registered nurse, across the country, you're generally above that line. You can afford to make it. But if you're a medical assistant, a laborer, a janitor, a home health aide, personal care aides, wait staff, food prep workers, you work in local schools, you're in nonprofits, you're doing social work, you're priced out of housing in your community. So in terms of what we're trying to do about it, Community Partners for Affordable Housing, we merged 3 different nonprofit housing organizations in January of this year. So the first organization was called Community Partners for Affordable Housing. That entity was initiated by the City of Highland Park in 2003. And what we've tried to do under Community Partners for Affordable Housing is structure ourselves as a community land trust. And so the way that community land trusts work is that we will develop new housing sometimes, but a lot of times what we do is we go out into the community, find homes. A lot of times they're homes that need a lot of rehab. Maybe they've been damaged or they're vacant, blighted. We acquire those homes, we rehab those homes, and then we sell the homes only to low to moderate income households. And so we might buy a house for, in Lake Forest, say it's $300,000 we buy a house for. We might put $50,000 of rehab into it to bring it back up to where it needs to be. Excuse me. But then people can't afford a house for $350,000 if you're making, say, $60,000 or less per year. So we sell those homes at what's affordable to someone at about that $60,000 range. So generally we sell the homes for about $180,000 to $190,000. So that's a big subsidy that we need for each one of those homes to make the home affordable. And so we use the community land trust model to protect that subsidy. So what happens is we sell the home only to an income qualified buyer. The nonprofit retains ownership of that underlying land. So essentially it takes that land value out of the equation. And there's a resale formula on the house. So when someone decides they want to sell their home, they have to sell it to another low to moderate income household at a resale restricted price. And what that does for people is it allows them to build some equity, just like you would in traditional home ownership. And you can even get some appreciation if the home appreciates, but that appreciation is capped so that it stays affordable to the next buyer. So if we're going to invest this much money in one home to make it affordable, we want to make sure that home stays affordable in perpetuity. So it's every time it's resold, it goes to another low to moderate income buyer at an affordable price. So we've done about 60 units in Highland Park through that community land trust model, including the senior cottages that we have here in Lake Forest. We've done about 11 in Lake Forest, 1 in Highwood, and we're up to about 20 actually now in Evanston. So we do some rental housing under Community Partners for Affordable Housing as well, like the senior cottages that we have here in Lake Forest. These are just some photos to give you a sense of what affordable housing looks like. A lot of times there are myths and stereotypes about what it looks like, who lives in affordable housing. Here in Lake Forest, when we first started using the community land trust model, there were a lot of concerns about that. The city council members weren't so sure about this. They voted to approve 2 pilot homes that we did. And that was actually the home in the middle on McKinley Avenue on the bottom. And we brought a lot of the city council members in to see the house before it was rehab. We have volunteer days where people can come in and work on the homes. And then when the home was finished, we often have open houses. So those same people can come back, see the finished house, meet the family that's moving in. And the elected officials, when they went through that process on that first home, they really got it. They understood that the buyer of that house was someone who was here in Lake Forest and ran into some financial issues and couldn't afford to stay in the community, and she was able to stay now. They saw that the house was a very nice looking house. It brought up property values. And so those are some of the myths and stereotypes that we have to get over. On the left, that's another one of our homeowners here in Lake Forest. On the top left, those are 14 townhomes, new construction units that we did in Highland Park, and then just some other units that we have in Highland Park. So the second organization that merged into Community Partners for Affordable Housing is the Affordable Housing Corporation of Lake County. That entity was started in 1993 by Lake County. What AHC was known for is a lot of programming, and so SEPA is what we call Community Partners for Affordable Housing for short. SEPA is a HUD-certified housing counseling agency. So we're not just getting people into housing and walking away. We prepare people for successful, responsible homeownership and rental. People who go through a HUD-certified pre-purchase program like ours are 30% less likely to ever experience foreclosure, and they're 283% more likely to get some kind of modification to save their home if they do get into some kind of trouble. So we do all that education and counseling with folks. One big hurdle to homeownership is down payment assistance. So we provide up to 5% of the purchase price to help low to moderate income households get into homeownership. So we've helped about 2,400 people get into homes that way. We also provide a lot of foreclosure prevention counseling. So we have a partnership with the 19th Circuit Court. Anyone who gets a foreclosure notice gets a notice with that foreclosure summons that says they can contact us, enroll in a mediation program, and that puts a minimum 2-month legal stay on the foreclosure proceeding. So we try to negotiate a loan modification with the lender or link them with other financial resources. So about 50% of the people who come through that program get some kind of modification or assistance enabling them to keep their home. So it's cutting foreclosures in half in terms of the people who come through the program. We've also acquired about 140 distressed properties, rehabbed them, got them occupied again, either through rental or home ownership. We also have an owner-occupied rehab program and a home accessibility program. So those programs help people who are already in homes but can't afford to make critical life safety and health repairs, or they need accessibility improvements to stay in their homes. So for example, an accessible ramp, for example, may cost about $10,000 for us to go in and put in an accessible ramp. But that'll keep someone in their home. It prevents unnecessary institutionalization. So a lot of times people can't get around in their homes, and so they end up in a nursing home, whereas a simple modification would allow them to stay in the home. And we also provide some rental assistance throughout the county as well. These are just some of our units through AHC and some of the clients that we serve. We've gotten into modular construction and we've moved homes, so that's some of the pictures in the middle there. And then the last of the organizations that came together to Community Partners for Affordable Housing is Lake County Residential Development Corporation. That organization was initiated by the Lake County Housing Authority in 1978, and we preserved or created over 1,300 units through Lake County Residential Development Corporation. These are just a few examples. On the bottom left, those are 110 senior cottages in Zion that we completed several years ago. The photo in the middle is a recent project in Mundelein that was about 60 family units. The top right is for people coming out of the homeless service system. Those are some other cottages on the left. And then just to wrap up, so the services that we're providing, I think I covered most of them, but HUD-certified housing counseling and education, down payment assistance, financial capability counseling, so both for people who are in homes, but also people who aren't yet getting into homes. We help them with financial capability coaching and counseling. There's a match savings program. We try to get them used to savings, help them improve their credits, decrease their debts, things like that. The home repairs and accessibility we talked about, foreclosure prevention, rental assistance. In terms of the community land trust, besides just acquiring and rehabbing and selling those homes, there's a stewardship component that we call it, and that's really ongoing relationships with all those homeowners to make sure that they know where they can go if there are questions. And so we provide home maintenance classes and budgeting classes and estate planning and property taxes and all those types of services to help make sure that people are successful in their homes. We do some new construction. We have about 90 units, rental units that we manage ourselves. Kathy's going to talk a little bit about the inclusionary housing program. We also help administer inclusionary housing programs in Highland Park and Evanston, and then a little bit in Lake Forest, where we get a little bit involved with that. So that's sort of a quick overview of what we're doing. Our vision is really to attack affordable housing in a couple of different ways. We're trying to work in areas that typically don't have a lot of affordable housing, and so affordable housing is very concentrated in the county, and so we're working in communities like Highland Park, Lake Forest, to try to increase the amount of affordable units in those communities. But then we're also working in communities like North Chicago, where there's a lot of neighborhood stabilization work that needs to be done. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to bring up property values and stabilize the neighborhoods and bring up the conditions of homes. And so we just finished 50 scattered site units in Mundelein and Round Lake Beach. We just built 8 new construction units in North Chicago. They're the first new construction units that North Chicago has seen in many years. So we're really trying to tackle it from both ends. And
Well, I'm going to bring it down to the local level and talk about what Lake Forest has done. And I have to say, we couldn't be where we were today without Rob's guidance and the help of his organization. It really, the technical expertise, the knowledge, the guidance, the financial partnership has really been amazing. Lake Forest has really does have a long history of affordable housing. If you look back decades, Lake Forest sometimes is known for the large estates. But if you think back, there historically were many second floor apartments in the Central Business District. Mostly all of the second floor above Market Square were affordable apartments. We've lost those. The South Park neighborhood still has our more affordable housing, but historically that was there was a portion of that area called Codfish Town, where the workers from the estates or utility workers or city workers lived. There still are a number of small cottages in that area, or at least smaller homes. Near the high school, we have an area of smaller homes. Northwestern Avenue, we have Crystal Point and some other condominiums. So historically, despite the reputation that Lake Forest has among some, Lake Forest really has had a fair diversity of housing historically. As the city council began to be more aware that we were losing more affordable units, we lost the apartments, as I mentioned, in the late 80s, 90s, and continuing on today, not as much. We saw a number of the smaller homes demolished. And the homes we were seeing replacing those were 2, 3, 4, 5 times as large as some of those homes. So the city council in about 2002, 2003 really started having a discussion about affordable housing and really talked about to do this in a way that really would be accepted in Lake Forest and perhaps would be consistent with our long tradition of planning, the City Council talked about really looking at affordable housing using a multifaceted approach. Looking at dispersing affordable units throughout our community, looking at partnering with some of our institutions. We know that Lake Forest College and Lake Forest Academy both have affordable faculty housing on their campuses. Lake Forest Academy has recently increased the number of faculty units. In fact, they're coming in with plans to add 2 more affordable units for their faculty very soon. Looking at ways to, perhaps are there code amendments that we can make that would help to encourage affordable housing. The council, and I'll talk more about this in a moment, established a housing trust fund board, an appointed group that specifically is charged with being a recommending body to the city council on how the city's funds in its affordable housing fund should be expended. So looking at it not as a problem having a single solution, not coming in and building, in some other communities it works to come in and build 25 affordable units or 50 affordable units, looking at Lake Forest and the way it has developed and perhaps what would be acceptable to the community, that really didn't seem like the right fit for our community. So a bit of history. As I mentioned, 2002, 2003, the City Council really began focusing on affordable housing. Interesting, as I've looked back in the files, there were discussions about affordable housing in the 80s in this community and in the 90s. So I don't think it was a new discussion, but what was new is that the City Council in 2003 took action. In 2003, they adopted a resolution that basically simply said, this is important to us. We need to, as a community, spend some time thinking about affordable housing and thinking about how we can preserve what we have, improve what we have, and add to that inventory. In 2005, the City Council adopted an affordable housing plan that really talked about who are we trying to help, where are good locations for affordable housing, and how can we make some progress in this area. I think importantly, the affordable housing plan, the multifaceted approach, acknowledge that if we make incremental progress, that although the numbers might not seem great, that incremental progress is a good thing. In 2005, the City Council also adopted an inclusionary housing ordinance. This was an amendment to the city code. And what the inclusionary housing ordinance requires is that any multifamily development with 5 or more units must provide affordable units as part of that development, or at the city's discretion can provide the city with a payment in lieu of providing on-site units. And I'll talk about a couple of examples where that ordinance has actually come into play. But it really, adopting that code really took a big step in making it clear to developers that affordable housing units is important to the City Council. In 2006, this was probably at the height of some of the demolition activity. The City Council adopted a demolition tax. So for every house that was demolished, every single family residence, there, in addition to building permit fees or utility connection fees for the new house, a tax was assessed. Initially the tax was $5,000. Today it's $12,000. And half of that tax goes into the city's affordable housing fund. So today, if you demolish a house, $6,000 goes into the city's affordable housing fund. $6,000 goes into our capital improvement fund, because we know that larger homes put demands on our storm sewer systems, our sanitary systems, as you're building new homes, demolishing and building new homes in established neighborhoods, there's wear and tear on the curbs and the streets. So that, again, that tax isn't a significant amount of money that's going to allow us to do all sorts of things. But again, it's an incremental step in trying to build support for affordable housing and in the case of the demolition tax, also for infrastructure. Historically, looking back, I think we've gone back as far as the 40s. The community has historically demolished about 8 houses a year, 8 single-family houses. We know that houses are built to different levels of quality. They have different lifespans, and there's no question there are houses in the community that have lived their useful lifespan and should be demolished. In recent years, our numbers of demolitions per year has been a little higher than 8, more like in the 12 to 15 range, depending on the year. Also in 2006, the council again adopted an amendment to the city code establishing the Housing Trust Fund, a place for the demolition tax to go into the Housing Trust Fund, and establish the Housing Trust Fund Board. Today that board has 3 members. Former Mayor Don Schoenheider chairs that board. Charlie King and Chris Baker are both members of that board. That board is a recommending body to the City Council. And then in 2008, recognizing that there's some opportunities for communities to work together, the City Council adopted a resolution in support of interjurisdictional cooperation, and I'll mention a project in a few minutes where I think we're putting that resolution into action. As part of particularly the housing plan, the City Council talked a lot about who are we targeting, who might we serve, and the longer the City Council talked, the more they realized that we're not just talking about seniors, we're not just talking about employees, we're talking about families who may look different than what might be considered a normal family. We're talking about families that might have been impacted by unexpected medical costs, loss of a job, a foreclosure situation, young professionals. I think we've seen more and more interest in attracting young people to move back to our community or to move to our community. Longtime residents who may be no longer able to stay in their houses. So it was a mix of people. It wasn't any single group, but that we really wanted a program that could provide opportunities to a variety of people. Rob already spoke to this, but defining what is affordable housing, just to reinforce that it really is housing that will not require families or individuals to devote more than about 30% of their income to housing costs. As the City Council went through the housing plan, adopted housing policies, really talked about where are good locations for affordable housing. And again, rather than focusing narrowly, the longer the discussions went on, I think there was a realization that there is a need in various parts of the community, and that it would be a good thing to try to provide affordable units in different areas, near the central business district, but not only near the central business district. Certainly being close to the library, within walking distance of schools, those are all good things. The council recognized that city-owned property provides a unique opportunity to help provide that land and move some of these projects forward. Residential areas, or areas that are zoned for multifamily use, or areas where residential development might be important. So again, looking broadly rather than seeing this problem as having only a single solution. And then finally, I just wanted to talk about some of our accomplishments. Again, the numbers don't look huge compared to the some of the numbers that Rob just talked about. But having seen members of the city council who have worked on this issue for a long time, having seen the members of the Housing Trust, there's great pride taken in what the city has accomplished to date. The city currently, within the city, there are 5 senior cottages. Those were developed by a not-for-profit group. Those are located on Conway Road, just north of the Telegraph Road train station. Those are rental units, age-restricted, and those were built through, as I said, a not-for-profit foundation that was established specifically for those cottages, initiated by former Alderman Tom Trop, really as a result of his own efforts to find a place for his parents. So it was a group of community members who came together. There was in-kind labor, there were in-kind contributions of materials. Lake Forest Place, Presbyterian Homes, stepped in a bit later on to help with maintenance issues, to help with tenant selection. However, the structure that was there really wasn't strong enough or expert enough. Certainly, city staff doesn't have expertise in supporting that kind of a project. And we were fortunate enough to be able to work through a transfer of the property with Community Partners for Affordable Housing. So as Rob mentioned today, Community Partners owns that project, owns that property. The property was originally city land that was donated to the project. That project, that housing development is now managed with expertise by Community Partners for Affordable Housing. So it's in good hands. I think some of the rents have never been raised since the 5 units were initially developed in 2013, or am I don't remember.
No, it was before
It was
that.
before that.
Yeah.
But the units have been very well liked. Residents move in and stay a long time, and it's proven to be a very good community. As I mentioned, both Lake Forest College and Lake Forest Academy have on-site faculty housing. Both of those institutions also have off-site housing that they provide for their faculty. To date, in partnership with Community Partners for Affordable Housing, using their land trust model, the city has been able to establish 9 affordable single-family homes. Those are homes that, in most cases, were homes that were code enforcement issues for us. They were poorly maintained. Some of them were vacant. There are several realtors in town who communicate with city staff when they have a house that might be appropriate for the program. The city council approves a contribution from the Housing Trust Fund. The city contributes about $150,000 per house toward the acquisition. Community Partners for Affordable Housing seeks grants and tax credits. As Rob said, a number of the homes have been improved through involving the community. Croya, our youth organization, has been involved in painting or cleaning up the yards. I think Lake Forest Bank and Trust, Wintrust employees have participated in some. I know, as you said, we had some aldermen, Housing Trust Fund board members that have been out on site. And those homes have been purchased by people in that target group that was reflected on the slide. I think our first home was purchased by a young couple, both of whom still had family in our community, went to church in our community, and they really had an interest in moving back. A single parent who had children in a high school, a coach from Lake Forest College who I think had a family of 5 or perhaps had 4 or 5 children. All of those homes, I think maybe 2 are on the market right now.
One actually just went under contract
Okay.
today, and then there's one other one that will be done very soon.
So again, the number 9 doesn't seem like much, but those homes are on the west side and on the east side and at the north end of the city and at the south end of the city. And as those families have moved in, those homes are not distinguishable from other homes. In fact, the neighbors have been delighted in most cases to see those homes improved and have welcomed the families. As Rob explained, as those homes are sold, Community Partners retains the land. Those homes are sold with the direction, under the direction of Community Partners, and those homes remain affordable in perpetuity. The City Council recently approved funding for 2 additional homes, so we're going to continue that project, and we work closely together to identify homes and opportunities. In the new development on Laurel and Western Avenue, the former site of this building, as part of that development, the inclusionary housing ordinance came into play, and there are 12 affordable apartments in that development, in those 3 apartment buildings. I think the total number required by the ordinance, 15% of the total number of units, I can't remember if it was 20 or 22, but the Housing Trust Fund Board thought perhaps having all 20 or 22 units at that site, they felt that they really wanted to split that. So 12 units are on site, and a payment in lieu of, I think, which amounted to about $650,000, was received by the city in lieu of having the full number of affordable units on that site. The new condominium buildings that are being built on the east side of McKinley Road, one building's complete, one's under construction, and there's a third that's still going through the approval process. As part of that, there are 2 affordable condominiums within that first building. The City Council a number of years ago also did a code amendment that allows what I've always known as granny flats, essentially a second living unit on a single family property, a property that's zoned for only a single family. These can be apartments over garages. We have many older homes that had coach houses or outbuildings, and in the past, our zoning code has said, if you're in a single family zoning district, and much of the city is covered by that zoning, you can only have 1 living unit. You can't rent out a unit. This change to the code simply acknowledged that we have some of those structures here today, and why not make those available to students or to individuals who are interested in living in some unique structures, furthering both a preservation goal, investment in those outbuildings, and providing housing. Looking forward, as I just mentioned, the City Council did authorize us to continue to work with Community Partners to acquire additional single-family homes. We are in discussions, really thanks to the leadership of Steve Potsek, who was former chairman of the Senior Resources Commission. We're in discussions about 5 to 12 additional senior cottages at Grove Campus, right near Dickinson. Some people have said, gosh, that's so far away from stores or the library or the train station. The unique aspect of that site is that although it's far from those uses, it is immediately adjacent to Dickinson Hall, which provides programs and transportation and companionship and a watchful eye. That project will again be in partnership with Community Partners for Affordable Housing. Participation from the Senior Foundation, I might have that name wrong, Senior Citizens Foundation. I expect that both Lake Bluff and Lake Forest will participate and contribute financially. So really looking forward to, again, creating a project that provides units, but also helps to build community, because we're doing things together as the village of Lake Bluff, Lake Forest, Community Partners, and really building that just sense of community, which I think
we need in our world today. Sometimes there's more divisiveness. We also expect that there are some multifamily projects, additional multifamily projects that'll be coming forward. Those projects will be near our business districts, and although they're not before us right now, those will also be required to meet the inclusionary housing ordinance. So, in summary, again, the numbers may not seem large, but the people who have been involved in these programs and making these things happen, I think, take great pride that we've really been able to do it in a way that seems to be viable for the long term. That's all I have for you.
Okay, this is your opportunity to grill Rob and Kathy with any questions that they haven't already answered. Remember, if you would like a card to write down your question, just raise your hand. If you've completed your question, raise your hand and they'll pick it up from you. And then they will come up to me and I'll ask them. So I want to start out with a question of my own. And Rob, I think this is for you. When the land trust owns the land, when the land trust owns the land, but then an individual owner owns the home, how are property taxes determined?
So the property taxes on land trust homes are, they're handled really like any other home. So property taxes are based on the assessed value of that home, and so, or what you can sell that home for. So because of the resale restriction on the home, say someone bought a home for $180,000, 10 years down the road, maybe they can sell it for $190,000 or something like that. So they're taxed based on what that resale restricted value is, as opposed to the full value if there wasn't that restriction on it. So they might be taxed on $180,000 or $185,000 as opposed to $350,000.
Okay. Here's a question that is for Rob as well. Where does Community Partners get the funding to purchase and rehab the houses?
So everywhere we can. We have local grants like Lake Forest and Highland Park and other communities that support us. We have county dollars that we're able to get. We apply for federal grants. We do private fundraising. We have individual donors. We have corporate and foundation support. So you know, we work hard to find the money wherever it can be found.
Okay.
One of the things that you know, that communities like is that we're able to leverage the dollars. So, for example, if Lake Forest puts in $150,000 for a house, that's not enough to make a home affordable in most cases. So we're able to go out and leverage those dollars with other federal dollars and private contributions to you know, bring more investment into the community.
Okay, thank you. Question for Kathy. If residents know someone who needs an affordable home, how can they access the affordable housing stock? So how does a person initiate that process of applying for or being considered for affordable housing?
When we get those calls, we actually encourage people to call Community Partners. And Rob, maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah, so there's, in terms of rental, there's a pre-application. So unfortunately, a lot of the rental units have waiting lists. So there's a pre-application on our website. People can fill it out on the website, or they can download a form and send it in. And that pre-application takes just initial self-reported information about income and assets. And based on that information, we will let them know whether it looks like they're likely to qualify. If they are, they'll be added to the waiting list, and then when their name comes up on the waiting list, they then have to submit a lot of other supporting documentation to back up what their actual income and assets are. In terms of ownership, you know, the same is true. People can get on a waiting list for ownership if there's not a unit available that they would like. Other times there are units that become available, and we put those on our website, and we get word out to the city and to schools. They put it out in newsletters to local businesses. We really try to market as locally as possible because we're trying to help people who live in and work in the communities where the homes are. So we don't list it on MLS, that type of thing. There's also, you know, we put out things on social media so people can hear about properties that are coming available soon. So there's a variety of ways.
Okay, thank you. Kathy, how many granny flats do you estimate you currently have in Lake Forest, and how many are currently being used?
Our count, and we don't know for sure, but when the city council was actually looking at this code amendment, as we reviewed our surveys, we believe there's perhaps 20 to 30 granny flats out there or some type of accessory dwelling. We don't have a good count of how many are being used. I think we hear that more by word of mouth, or we learn about it if someone comes in for a building permit to make improvements. But I would, my sense is that we're probably at about 10 to 15 that are actually occupied, and some of those are simply occupied by family members. So it's, I think there's more opportunity there.
And because those are being rented out privately, they don't go through the city.
Correct.
Okay. Rob, I think this is probably in reference to what you just said. Someone is asking, you say to go on the website to apply, but what is the website?
It's www.cpahousing.org, and there are flyers as you walk in on that table too that has our website address on it, but it's www.cpahousing.org.
Okay, so when we're finished, be sure you pick that up if you have an interest. Another one for Rob, about how much money is spent annually on affordable housing? I assume this means CPAH, like what is your budget basically?
So regionally, we spend, it varies a little bit from year to year based on whether there's a particularly large project going on. But on average, I would say we spend about $4 to $5 million a year on affordable housing projects and programs throughout the county.
Okay. I guess this is for either of you, have Lake Forest Hospital, Lake Forest College, or any other institutions done workplace housing? So in other words, similar to Lake Forest Academy, are other institutions in the area doing the same things in terms of housing for faculty, staff?
Both Lake Forest College and Lake Forest Academy have faculty housing on campus, as well as they subsidize their faculty living off campus. The hospital used to have nursing apartments on site. Those are no longer there. But as they now begin to look at South Campus, they certainly are talking about whether they can accommodate some employee housing there. Those are really the three institutions that we've talked to about employee housing. As Rob said, when houses become available, we distribute that information widely to city employees. We work with both school districts and the hospital to get that information out.
Okay, and that kind of addresses part 2 of this question, which is about police, fire, and schools. So in order for people who work for the city in those areas to be able to live in the community, they would need to know about the availability of affordable housing. So they would be able to get information through their employer?
Yes, we distribute it widely if homes become available. And again, the city staff, we're not the experts in affordable housing, so we really rely on community partners to look at, to explain income eligibility, to evaluate income eligibility, and really maintain any waiting lists that might be out there. But I know we have had city staff who have worked with community partners and explored opportunities.
Okay, thank you. And this would be for Kathy. I think as a community, what efforts are being made to educate our population on the need for affordable housing?
I think the council's actions over the years, really by adopting policies, by adopting resolutions, I think they've tried to get that word out. Certainly continuing to talk about it, talk to groups like this. I know at ward meetings we've talked about it in past years. So I think it's just a continual discussion.
I know at times there's been controversy when affordable units have been proposed, and I think sometimes there's a misconception that you're talking about low-income housing when in fact what's considered affordable in Lake Forest is different from what might be considered affordable in other communities. How do you deal with that when there is controversy about affordable housing that's being proposed?
When the 5 senior cottages that exist today on Conway Road were proposed, we held a number of neighborhood meetings because we had identified probably about 15 potential sites. And frankly, the site that was selected really was selected because neighbors in that area were supportive. And I think it doesn't benefit the community to have a real controversial, heated, negative discussion. And I think that's why the city council has taken the approach of, let's do this incrementally. Let's look at different ways to support affordable housing. A number of years ago, an affordable only development was proposed on the northwest corner of Telegraph and Everett Road. 16 units, rental, and that was very controversial. And I think that discussion led the council to adopt the inclusionary housing ordinance, thinking that perhaps it's better to try and integrate these units throughout the community instead of building a single development that is all affordable. Again, with the exception of the senior cottages, which there are 5 units together, but that area has been very well received.
I think in terms of League's positions on affordable housing, it makes more sense in some ways to intersperse it throughout the community, because then you're not creating an isolated, mini community that isn't really, isn't really integrated with the rest of the area. I guess it makes for a healthier community overall if you do have affordable units that are interspersed rather than isolated. Is there an expected date of completion for senior cottages? How will people apply, and will it be assisted or independent living?
The cottages that are being contemplated for Grove Campus near Dickinson Hall will be independent living, not assisted living. Completion date, I would say by the end of ¡21. If we can advance that sooner, we will certainly do that. And the way that seniors will find out, we will certainly work with Dickinson Hall to get the word out. But we will be working with Community Partners for Affordable Housing because of the successful partnership, their ownership of the existing 5 cottages. We will be looking to community partners and hope we can achieve a partnership that allows community partners to own, operate, manage, do the tenant eligibility. So we will work closely with senior housing. And I don't know if you want to talk about the current process.
Yeah, I mean, so there is a wait list now for senior cottage residents. And so there's certainly the demand that's out there for sure. And you know, we'll continue to take applications to get people on the wait list. And there's a preference if you live or work in the community. Otherwise, it's a first come, first served basis. You have to make below certain income limits, and I think there's some discussion on what those income limits would be depending on funding sources that we use. The income limits at the current senior cottages is 60% of median income. So for I would say a 4-person household is around 48,000, but usually it's a 1 or 2-person household. So in the 30 range generally would be the income limit.
And the income limit is at least in part, determined by the funding source. If
Right, exactly.
a particular grant or tax credit may specify what that income level needs to be. I would also say that with Dickinson Hall, because we're looking at a partnership, we would really be looking at providing first priority to not only Lake Forest residents or those with connections to Lake Forest, but also to Lake Bluff residents. Really seeing this as, again, a way to build community and look at this more regionally.
Okay, that concludes the questions. I want to just make a couple of closing comments. One is, please do stop out in the, outside of the room here where we have a table set up with some refreshments. Thank you very much to Kathy and the City of Lake Forest for providing those. We do have League of Women Voters brochures and additional information out here, and as Rob mentioned, there's CPAH information out here as well. So let's thank our speakers again. And Bill Schellhaus is doing video, and the video will be on our website when it's ready, which is lwvlflb.org. Thank you.
Okay, you too. Yeah. Thank you so much.
We will be, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.